Jason Roth, 32 years old, a homeowner, who was providing affordable housing for the citizens of Seattle through a rental that he bought at the age of 25 and fixed up, who now is stuck with a deadbeat renter who wasn't paying him rent but was listing the house to make money on Airbnb. Jason Roth, as a result, is left sleeping in his van with his dog. This segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. If you are an undivided subscriber, you have already heard the story of Jason Roth because we had a half-hour-long interview with him on yesterday's episode of Sundays with Subscribers. So if you haven't seen it yet, I encourage you to become a subscriber at undividedpod.com. It's just $5 a month. But this story is really too critical not to bring to the rest of you on Monday, so we want to play some clips from that interview. So Jason Roth is 32 years old. He set out at the age of 25 to try to put his skills into action to create a better life for himself. And he wanted to find a fixer-upper home in Seattle that he could flip and turn into a rental.
In 2016, I was knocking on doors in a sort of lower income neighborhood of Seattle, looking for a fixer-upper house to use my skill set to create a nice little rental. And I did find one. And I was able to get friends to help and was able to give them affordable bedrooms. And I did that for 7 years.
So that's awesome. 25-year-old goes out, knocks door to door, wants to find a house that he can buy and that he can flip and turn into a rental. I mean, that's the kind of person who we should be celebrating, who wants to contribute in that way and who wants to be a small landlord to provide what? Affordable housing to people. Isn't that what progressives say is so important? So anyway, he rents this out for a couple years, and then he is on the cusp of moving out of state for work. He's trying to get his pilot license and further his career in that way. And so he decides to use a rental agency to find a tenant and to completely manage this particular rental property, only to find out, after a year's time, they go back to him and say that we're not gonna manage this property anymore. What they didn't tell him is that the tenant that they had put in there wasn't paying rent.
They offered to me to keep the tenant, and they implied he was in good standing. That's a whole nother issue that I'm dealing with right now. But they left me with the hot potato, so to speak.
So they had managed it. They didn't want to continue to manage the lease.
No, because they failed to let me know that they were in legal proceedings with this tenant.
So here you have this young landlord, puts his trust in a rental agency to find a good tenant to manage the company. They come back a year later. They say, hey, we don't want to manage this, your house anymore, but you can keep the tenant if you'd like. You can go through the tenant and just do that between you and him. But they failed to tell him that the tenant hadn't been paying rent and that they were, in fact, in legal proceedings to try to get the money owed to them by that tenant. So basically, they were trying to put their problem back on Jason Roth. So he thinks to himself, well, okay, yeah, if you're I've already got a tenant, why would I want this tenant? I don't know that there's any issues with this tenant. So he enters an agreement directly with this tenant. And before long, during that process, he starts to realize that there's a problem. The tenant, suggests and says, well, I can get you the whole deposit at once. And they make an agreement to, have that be a payment plan. And then the tenant starts to hint at maybe not being able to afford the first month's rent. And in fact, the tenant never paid Jason Roth rent. And this is going back to March. So since that tenant since Jason Roth took over the lease with his tenant in March, he's only been paid a total of $1,000 since then. And he believes that this tenant truly never intended to pay him rent. He just intended to use the system to squat in his home. I asked Jason Roth about now the court proceedings to try to evict him and how long and complicated and difficult all of that is.
The delays involved for me have been the biggest problem. Mm-hmm. So like getting the certificate for that eviction resolution pilot program could take up to a month. Getting the court date could take 3 to 4 months. Once the court date comes, their Housing Justice Project, I believe, gives them a free lawyer on the day of so that it gets automatically continued another 3 to 4 months.
And you don't get a free lawyer.
No, my lawyer is very expensive. If he's listening to this, I think you're a great lawyer. Every phone call's a lot.
Yeah.
It's more than I make in a day. So
he's had to put his whole life on hold. He's had to not move out of state to deal with all of this. He is having to hire an attorney at his own expense to try to get this tenant, who never intended to pay him any rent, out of his home. And those tenants, because the city of Seattle is so woke, those tenants get free attorneys through the Housing Justice Project. And so certainly there's no monetary obligation for them to hurry things along to get a resolution. And this gets worse. In fact, it's the most egregious tenant-landlord story I've ever heard. So Jason Roth, as he's trying to work with this tenant to get something from him, giving him payment plans, offering him payment plans, but getting nothing in return, as he's then starting the court proceedings to try to get this tenant evicted, Jason Roth finds out that this tenant is listing a floor of the house on Airbnb.
He was in default from day one, and I found out he was maintaining an Airbnb there that month, and I would drive by there almost every day, and I'd see new cars and new people coming in and out of the house. It's just unacceptable.
So how much was he making off of the Airbnb while he was simultaneously not paying?
Depends on the month, but in the summer, I think it was going for $150 to $200 a night.
Wow.
And it was rented every night.
I mean,
yeah.
And at this point,
makes your blood boil.
Where are you living? My
van. I have a cozy camper van.
How long have you been living in your van?
Since the summer. I mean, I stay at part-time. I crash with friends. I have family in the area. But, yeah, I mean, it just sucks. I shower at my gym.
Sorry. 32 years old, homeowner, virtually homeless.
Yeah. I mean, could I go find another apartment, like a dirt cheap bedroom somewhere? Probably. But I have school to pay for. I have bills. I have this house to pay for. Like, I don't want to go into debt. I mean, I will sleep wherever I need to make sure I don't, go into debt or start struggling in other ways. I will sacrifice my comfort right now to get this done.
You heard that correctly. Jason Roth, 32 years old, a homeowner, who was providing affordable housing for the citizens of Seattle through a rental that he bought at the age of 25 and fixed up, who now is stuck with a deadbeat renter who wasn't paying him rent but was listing the house to make money on Airbnb. Jason Roth, as a result, is left sleeping in his van with his dog. He's sleeping in his freaking van with his dog. Oh, and to make matters worse about the Airbnb listing, how was this individual who was living in a house that wasn't his, paying rent, how was he allowed to list a floor of that home on Airbnb? Well, that tenant got a permit from the city of Seattle. That tenant convinced the city of Seattle to grant him a permit to run a short-term rental. Now, Airbnb has since taken down the listing. The city of Seattle has since acknowledged to Jason Roth its mistake. It was basically the honor system. Somebody came to them, I want to rent my house out on Airbnb. He didn't show any proof that he owned the house. He didn't show any proof that if he was a renter, he had permission from the owner of the house to list it on Airbnb. And the city of Seattle and the fine bureaucrats said, sure you go, here's a permit to make money off a house that isn't yours and that you aren't paying rent on. It's the craziest story I have ever heard, and I hate to laugh. But even Jason has to laugh at certain points to avoid crying. But he brought up during our interview, again, you should absolutely go watch the full interview at undividedpod.com, become a subscriber. It aired yesterday on Sundays with subscribers. He brought up what really came to my mind, which is here is a young man doing everything right and providing an affordable home, affordable housing to the community who is getting absolutely screwed.
And what drives me crazy, of all this stuff, what drives me the most crazy is that I listen to the council member debates. I try to stay up on local politics. Everyone talks about affordable housing. We need to build more affordable housing. The county and the city are not going to build affordable housing. It's people like me who are making it happen. And I know landlords, the connotation of a landlord is evil, but they're the ones providing the housing. So why am I fronting the burden here? If it's such a big deal to help people with these, with rental assistance, then let me qualify for some assistance.
Yeah. I mean, he's the one living in a van. He's the one living in a van now. And I said at the beginning, I would feel bad for any landlord in this situation. But there's just something that pulls at my heartstrings about Jason Roth, his kindness, his compassion toward other people, his dog. I always have sympathy for a dog. But even he said he had such a trusting nature, and now he's left just wondering, why is this happening to me?
There just has to be some sort of narrative shift that like landlord, and if you own a business and you own a house, you're not inherently evil. Like I love to fix things and improve things, just like someone might like to go out and people buy and restore furniture. Like I saved up forever because I wanted to buy an old house and fix it up and rent it to my friends. People need to see that, like, that's how I can add value. Some people's skill sets. I understand there's going to be evil landlords out there, like slumlords, but there should be Wally. There should be checks and balances for that, but I should be, I don't know, getting
Wally's
heated just thinking about this.
Well, you're doing everything right. I mean, do you feel sometimes like you're being punished for being like a good person?
Yeah. In the city that I've paid taxes in and lived in forever, and went and gave homeless to the clothing to the homeless in front of my house, like picked up trash in my neighborhood, cleaned up the green belt, like all the stuff I've been trying to do since I moved back to Seattle in the last 6-7 years. It's like I'm getting punished. I keep trying to rack my brain. Why? Like, what did I do to get this short end of the stick?
You lived in Seattle. You lived in Seattle, where hardworking people, small business owners, small landlords get absolutely screwed in the name of some weird fringe woke ideology that protects a tenant like that over a guy like Jason. And I'm sure there are people who've seen this headline about this landlord homeless, who will be like, well, this person might be down on their luck. Okay. So we're not going to name the tenant today because there is an eviction hearing coming up. We'll give him his day in court. But we stumbled upon and have been able to confirm and verify that it is, in fact, the account. We've stumbled upon the Instagram account of the man who's living rent-free in Jason Roth's South Seattle home. Now, imagine how infuriated you would be to be in this situation, to have someone living in your home for free, listing it on Airbnb. Now imagine how angry you would be as Jason Roth to see videos on this person's Instagram account showing him throwing parties at your house. Throwing parties, having friends over, having a good time in the house you bought at the age of 25 that you rented out and never got a freaking dime for. $1,000. Now, put yourself in the shoes of Jason Roth, who again, hey, maybe this guy's down on his luck. Maybe he lost a job. Maybe he just can't afford to pay rent. Well, it turns out this particular tenant is living, or at least pretending to live, a lavish lifestyle. Spends a lot of time at the gym, showing pictures of his abs. Spends a lot of time at the gym for someone who could be out looking for a job. Posts inspirational quotes about how hard he's working, about living his dreams. Posting videos on vacation. Posting photos of yachts videos of the inside of yachts. Says he runs a business that hosts yacht parties.
You didn't tell me about the bar. What? Oh yeah, no, I want the.
Taking videos for his followers, showing that he's staying at lavish properties on the water. He has all these businesses that he says he dabbles in. He's an entrepreneur. In one of his posts, he said that becoming a millionaire was an old dream of his, as if the new dream is to become a billionaire. Talks about how hard he works, how hard he's working, how people don't appreciate hard work. All the while squatting in a 32-year-old's home, not paying him a dime, while that 32-year-old sleeps in a van with his dog. So that should erase any sympathy you have for the man squatting in Jason Roth's home, who is clearly taking advantage of a system and of policies that are designed to protect tenants like him over hardworking people like Jason. It's not right. It is not morally right. Yes, are there terrible landlords? Of course there are. But they are the exception, not the rule. And for Seattle progressives and politicians who scream left and right about big bad landlords, if you continue down this path, that is all the landlords that the city will have. You will scare away small landlords like Jason Roth, who do this community a service, who are good people, who provide an affordable place to live. And the only landlords who will survive are the landlords that can afford to survive. The big landlords, the very landlords you take issue with. A system that protects that man over Jason Roth is not a system that is working. That segment was brought to you in partnership by our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. I laugh because there is no shortage of frustration.